Hello, everyone. Welcome to another Spotlight edition. We are spotlighting volunteers on Connect Together. I'm Eric Molendyk, the National Coordinator of Tetra, and today I'm very pleased to interview and have a conversation with Cody. And Cody, what's your last name?
My last name's Wesley.
That skipped my mind for a second. So here I am with Cody Wesley, volunteer of the Edmonton Tetra Chapter. And so, Cody, let's start there. What is your background as far as designing, or kind of what's your professional background?
You bet. Thanks for having me again, Eric. My background is in design. So I'm actually a graduate from the University of Alberta Bachelor of Design program. So a little bit different. A lot of people are familiar with engineering, where engineers are really good experts at the materials and the science and engineering, I guess, and the physics behind things. Where design focuses a little bit more on the personnel, the people that are going to be using it, the users, and the system that things are within. So I have a little bit of knowledge and background and training in industrial design, which is traditionally product design, as well as visual communication design, which is graphic design, more or less. And I work for the University of Alberta's Faculty of Medicine and Dentistry, where we design different educational resources for both residents, med students, as well as patients and families. So really looking at innovative things for education, anything from like 3D printed anatomical models to board games, different videos, a really wide selection of things that I end up getting to do in my career.
Okay, well, that sounds great. So, how did you, I mean, medical devices, dentistry, that's something that everybody uses. And what was your where do you go for school for something like that? Or if somebody's listening, kind of what is the path that you can take to go down that career? As you said, lots of people know about engineering and building things, but how did you discover the career path that you're on?
For sure. A little bit of a weird way of getting there. I was actually an apprentice mechanic, and then I worked at motorcycle shops and other things. Ran into a friend from who I knew as a kid, who was in this thing called industrial design. So I looked it up, and I was like, "This is an inventor. This looks amazing. This is exactly what I wanted to do." So that's the program that I went through, and really, there are a few schools in Canada. So there's one in Edmonton, there's one in Vancouver at Emily Carr, and then there is OCAD in Toronto, and a few other smaller schools that across the country. But the really amazing part of it is it's really focused on human-centered design. So it's really trying to get a really good understanding of the person that's going to be using your product or whatever you end up making. So you really have to consider every aspect of something. And then a lot of times we end up working with engineers as well, because we don't have the same skills as them. Yeah, and it's definitely something that's really shaped my life going into design, and it's helped me a lot with a lot of the projects that I work on with Tetra.
Well, certainly, that's what I so appreciate doing these interviews is getting better to know people. And what all the volunteers seem to have in common is a diverse background. Like you always seemed inclined to, like you said, whether it was motorcycles or mechanics, fix or help things. And then
Mhm.
you said it helps you on Tetra projects. So let's move into that now. You went to school, you knew the career that you want, and but how did you discover volunteering for Tetra? How did that come about?
Yeah. Actually, partially the way through university, I started thinking like, I think I can use design in my education to actually help people, which was a really amazing thing for me to discover. I was like, yeah, all these things all have to be designed and made. So I heard about Tetra actually from a friend of a friend, and ended up starting volunteering for Tetra. And the great part about it is it really cemented this fact that I wanted to do something where I got to do stuff that actually helped and served other people. And so I reached out to Tetra about 3 years ago when I was in my third year of university, and really was a highlight of some of my projects. I was able to do some of my school projects based on my Tetra clients. Yeah, and then it's just it kind of led me on the path that I'm going on actually, which is now working within medicine as a designer.
Yeah, and when so you talked about so you've been involved with Tetra for 3 years, and during that time, talk a little bit about some of the projects that stick out in your mind, or you've had an opportunity to work on that you thought, man, I really got to put my skills to use, and I think what I could created is really going to make a difference.
For sure. Um, it's some of the amazing parts about the projects that I've worked on is getting to actually meet these people, and getting to have a better understanding of people who can be a little bit different than me, which has been incredible. Like one person that I met, they needed bed rails for their bed. And I actually found out that making these bed rails for them helped them sleep through the night, which helped them then get to their physiotherapy. And it's like, oh, wow, look at this. Like this relatively small thing could have like a fairly large impact and have like just that missing piece of the puzzle. So that was a really interesting project for me, just to see how that fit into like their entire life.
And
Um,
so the bed rails, were you safely mounting them to their bed, or?
Actually, the client he was a really big guy. He was an ex football player, so he was like 6'4" and like 200 and some pounds, and so he was actually too big for a lot of the commercial bed rails. And so I got to make some ones for him out of wood um, and nice fabric and stuff to match his bed, so that would actually be tall enough because he would have spasms at night. And his foot would go over top of the bed, over
Yeah.
his existing bed rails, and then get stuck. And then it was just a really kind of bad situation. There was that project, and then I actually got to help make a bocce ramp. For people that don't know, bocce, it's like bocce ball, but way more amazing. These people who have limited upper body movement actually use a ramp. It's kind of similar to curling, I would say. They use a ramp and an assistant to help them set up their shots, and then they roll the balls down the ramp to then shoot the shot or throw it. And I got to help create a high-end bocce ramp, and the client actually ended up using it at some really high-end, high-level competition, and got to meet some people involved in the Paralympics and make like a whole bunch of connections. So yeah, being part of these people's stories is really really interesting and rewarding and fun, really.
Yeah, and I just love you explaining, Cody, and thanks for explaining it the way you did, because that's what I always try to let people know is it doesn't have to be a complicated device to make a world of difference. So
Yeah,
if
absolutely.
somebody's watching and like, what do these guys do, or how does it work? And I wanna let people know that it's pay what you can. So Tetra's also a nonprofit, and as you can see from Cody's passion here, his main focus is to make something that makes a difference.
Mhm.
And if you're struggling on something, as Cody said, sometimes if you get help with one thing, this guy, he was having spasms at night and he just wanted to keep his legs on his bed, but then in return, he was able to sleep easier. He had more energy, so he was able to get up on time to get to physio. Um, just like building something itself, everything needs to be connected. Well, sometimes one little device can make a true difference in somebody's life. And so if you're watching as a potential volunteer or as a client, no request or nothing that you make can be too small. So on that thought about making something, when you're at a meeting and a request comes in, clients can submit things online. What draws you to a project? Is it the description of it, what the person needs, or do you personally think, okay, I have the skill set to build this? How do you as a volunteer choose the projects you work on?
I think it'd probably be smarter sometimes if I said this. I have the skill set to build this. 'Cause sometimes I get a little bit like having to learn quite a bit of stuff and reaching out to other members to help me, which is actually pretty great. But I think it's definitely the description of the people or what they're looking for that usually I'm like, oh, that sounds like actually a lot of fun to work on, whether it's sports stuff or things for kids or whatever. If it just I think definitely it's hearing the descriptions of the projects that get me wanting to work on them.
And then I had the privilege of getting to know you better at one of our national conferences. And I know one of the skill sets that you have and you use when you're working on a project is sketching and kind of drawing things out. And so talk about your own process of how, okay, I've gotten excited. I read the project description at a meeting. I've met now with the client. I've heard from them what they're hoping to have created. And then what's your process to try and make that solution a reality?
Mhm. So yeah, usually it's starting out again with talking to the client and really trying to have a good understanding. And a lot of times talking to their families or friends who are along with them, especially if somebody is somebody who's caring for them as well. They might have specific needs for this product as well. So really just having an understanding of the whole solution or the whole problem, the whole issue. Then next I go back and I do some research actually to see like, is somebody already doing this? Is there something available that we just have missed? Or is there something similar that we could get some inspiration on and then adapt things? Then I usually end up doing some sketches to get some ideas because I really find sketching is a great way to show people what I'm thinking. And because sometimes you'll do a sketch and you'll show a client and they're like, oh, that's perfect. I really love this thing. Or you show it to them and they're like, oh no, you missed the point. Oh, no, not at all. And then we have something to talk on. So then we usually talk on the sketch and try to figure out something. And then it's making a prototype. So usually out of some sort of cheaper material or something that I can do a little bit quickly just to get an idea. Like for the bocce ramp, for example, and the final one was all made out of aluminum. But for a prototype, I made one out of wood first off, just because it was a lot easier to do. Try to get some angles figured out, some mathematics stuff figured out, and also figure out if it's going to work for the client. And then it's usually a lot of back and forth. What's nice about that too is you get to know the client pretty well. But back and forth to make sure it's going to work with them, making alterations until there's something that they're happy with. That's something that actually can help them. And as well, a lot of times on the projects too, I'll reach out to some of the other members because, like I said, I'm not an engineer, or like I don't have skill sets of some of the other guys or other people that are volunteers at Tetra. So I'll reach out, be like, hey, I remember you were a really good welder. Do you think you could help me with this? Or somebody was a mechanical engineer. It's like, hey, I'm really having a hard time figuring out the right angle of this, or I'm having this issue. Working together, and then I'm trying to make something that really can help with that person's issue or need.
Well, that's another aspect, and I see you're great at bringing up these topics through the course of our conversation, but just how the volunteers, that's the privilege that I've gotten to see over the years, is how they work together and help each other to do the projects and make the devices. And when that happens, when you're getting together with someone, do you usually meet at their shop? Do they meet at your workshop? Kind of how are the projects made in that regard? Where are the projects put together or fabricated?
For meeting other members, I think it's a little bit of both. I've met some people at the client's house, which is nice because then we both have a really good, they're able to see kind of exactly what I'm talking about for the most part. And you have the client there to then speak on the issue as well. Or I've met at other people's workshops because it's like, hey, I know you've got this tool, we need to use this to work on. But for where the projects are actually fabricated, I know some people have really nice shops at their houses. I go to my dad's place, use his garage and all the tools over there. I've also got a little bit of tools at my place, some 3D printers and things that I play around with on projects, as well as we have a membership at a local makerspace. And back when I was in university, I used the university shop quite a lot. So I used every ounce of free time that they would let me in there to help build things for Tetra and my own as well.
Awesome. Now you talked a little bit of just a moment ago about sketching. Do you mind if I ask? It looks like there's a sketch right behind you,
Oh,
hanging
yeah.
hanging on the wall. Would you mind grabbing that picture?
Sure.
Because for those who are watching and they're wondering, when he says sketching, what does that mean? So it caught my eye. It looks like a pretty official sketch right there.
Yeah, this was one from, I had to take a lot of fine arts classes. So that's a building here in Edmonton that I drew a few years ago.
Yeah, well, it caught my eye, my friend. It looks very impressive. And so
Thanks,
you can imagine when Cody talks about sketching, he does that same type of thing when he meets with a client on a Tetra project.
Yeah, but a lot of the sketches I do for clients will be like more things like this, like just really rough to get ideas across, right? So instead of like spending a long time doing a polished sketch, sometimes you can just be like, is it something like this? You're like, hey, is it going to be a tube and we're going to put something around it and we're going to make a little bracket similar to this? So sometimes just drawing something up with just simple objects, simple squares and shapes. It's like you don't have to be a really amazing artist to be able to sketch something to help somebody understand.
And I saw your sketching firsthand at the national conference. We were showcasing Tetra and talking about its different aspects. And you would meet with people in person, and they would talk about a challenge they were facing, and then you would try and sketch it for them in real time.
Yeah,
So
that was a lot of fun.
Yeah, and I could see the energy that you got off of somebody describing their needs, and when you're sketching it and they give you the feedback and they say, yes, we're on the right track, and I can just picture that being a crucial step and kind of step one into completing a project.
Yeah.
Also behind you there, is that 3D printed on top of the
There's a bunch of stuff.
Yeah, it looks like 3D. Do you do 3D printing yourself too?
Yeah. We've got some table. That's not 3D printed. I've got some face shields that we were doing to help with some COVID relief too with work.
Now, yeah, I was going to say this is work-related devices, right?
Yeah, weird things. And then somebody's throat, a trachea, I think this is.
Yeah.
Work as well for different sim tools for people working on different simulation stuff for the medical school.
Yeah, well, that's
a bunch of weird stuff.
Yeah, that's part of the medical devices. Well, you have a really interesting job, and before we started the interview, you talked about how you're as busy as ever, and I can see that whether it's your own job and helping with medical devices or helping people with disabilities through your volunteering, you're putting your skills to good use. And Cody, you're always a great guy to talk to, and I've really enjoyed our conversation. And the other thing people might not know is you're quite a basketball fan.
Absolutely.
So I'm sure, like many people out there, you celebrated when the Raptors won last year. You and I were texting back and forth, and fingers crossed. We all hope in good time that basketball is back sooner than later. So we have another thing to celebrate and cheer for besides the completion of Tetra devices.
Exactly. The next Raptors championship.
Yeah. So, well, thanks so much. I know you have joined us here right after work. I don't want to take up too much of your time, but keep up the great work. And thanks so much for joining me today.
You bet. Thank you for having me. And thank you to everybody out there watching this video.
Okay. Well, you and I will talk again soon.